as you can see on my screen, we're going to be talking about the organizational standards today, primarily the system and the process. As we mentioned in the email before, if you have more questions on the content and sort of the documentation and things that are allowable for various standards, we do have a training on our website for that you can access as we speak. But of course, we're going to record today's training and post it up on the CSBG grantee resources page. Again, if it's been a minute, you have to go to the page now and then go to the very bottom and click on the drop down to access the wealth of materials that we have on other things. So content training can be found there. And today we're primarily going to talk about the process. Josiah with the CCAA is here, as well as Becky with the Community Services Block Grant Program and DOLA. So we are going to jump right in. Let's see. Okay, so a little bit about the timeline. As if anybody has been in the process for a couple of years with CSBG for a couple of years now, then you know we're continually trying to tweak the timing of this process to make it as efficient for you as possible. And so that's something that we do have in mind this year as well. It is going to be due on November 15th this year in the THO system. And so that means that all eligible entities need to have all of their documentation submitted for all standards that are applicable by November 15th, close of business. So we will do an initial review after everything has been received. And of course, since we have something like 27 eligible entities that we need to review 50 something standards for, that process can take a little bit of time. So we're hoping to have that done within 3 or 4 weeks. And once we have completed our initial review, then we will send you feedback via email about the standards which need to be tweaked, they weren't quite met, maybe a technical assistance plan is required. So you'll be getting that feedback in email form from us 3 to 4 weeks after your original submission. Once that email has been received, you're gonna have a couple of weeks to respond accordingly. So for standards that were not met, but maybe you just have to submit different documentation that you do have, then you can do that. And then some standards just will not be met at this time. And for those standards, a written TAP will be needed. And we'll explain a little bit more about the process that will entail in the email that we send to you. We're still kind of tweaking the best way to actually keep track of those TAPs, because in the past, it's something that we've talked about and really have not yet fine-tuned the system for. So this year, we're really going to be focusing on making sure that those technical assistance plans associated with unmet organizational standards have a way to be tracked, and we can ensure that they're actually, being used for the purpose, which is accountability. And on that note, organizational standards is a large process, right? And the purpose is to ensure that our eligible entities have the organizational capacity to really manage the CSBG program well. And if that's not in place, to determine which areas need improvement and to actively manage them so that we get everybody up to a certain standard of acceptability. So kind of like I mentioned in the past, this is a process that we've really needed to fine tune to make it as optimal for both the state office and the eligible entities. But we're committed to doing that this year and really using it as a tool for accountability and performance management, and potentially for organizations that are continuously struggling, that could lead to corrective action or quality improvement plans to really ensure that we have the right entities on the bus, so to speak, and that we're really providing focused training and technical assistance to the folks who need it. So just as a little heads up, we are increasing the level of accountability that we have throughout the process. And this is going to be one of the tools that we use to ensure that as well. So after you've resubmitted and submitted any written technical assistance plans that may be needed, then the final review will be complete. We at the CCAA and at DOLA will do one final review, make sure that all statuses are appropriate, whether met or unmet or met with a TAP required. And then we will let you know as well. So agency compliance assessment will be finalized and reported in OLDC after this is all complete as a part of the annual report. We do have to report on the number of entities that we have at 100% met status, 90%, and et cetera on down the road. So that's another one of those processes that we're really fine tuning and hoping to increase our performance on at the state level. So a little bit about the statuses that you're going to see in the system. Josiah is going to walk through the mechanics, but a little bit of an overview about the status. A MET status, when you select at the eligible entity level that standard has been met, you're indicating that you completed everything in the standard and that you have the appropriate documentation to show that as well. Unfortunately, sometimes we run into a situation where maybe an organization did complete everything that was required, but the documentation is not in place, like the board minutes don't accurately reflect that that was complete or something to that effect. So MET means it's complete and there's documentation in place that can be provided to show as much. A not met status will be used after final review is complete, and not met will be used if a status, an organizational standard is not met at this time, but there's a plan in place to address compliance. So for not met status, there is no TAP required. That's when we would use the next status, which is not met TAP required. So this means that there's a written plan in place that will show how you are going to come into compliance with this standard in the near future. And then not met, TAP not required means that it doesn't have to be used at this time or have to be addressed at this time, and we're not generally going to use this. If a standard is not met, then either there will be a TAP required or it's simply not met, is not going to be met at this time, and that is what it is. So as a little reminder, the not met, TAP not required is not generally going to be used, and will surely communicate if there are situations where that's the appropriate standard. And then, of course, we also have some standards that are not applicable, especially for public entities. Not every organizational standard is going to be applicable. So one of the, you should see last year, if it's not applicable, it'll either say in the prompt, you can select not applicable, or maybe you selected in prior years that it wasn't applicable, and then the same would likely be true this year. If you have any questions, of course, you can always reach out to us and say, we don't think this applies, and we can suss it out. But there's a few little indicators, both in the standard itself and the verbiage that's used, as well as statuses that have been used in the past that will help you suss out if not applicable is applicable in your case. So as far as the documentation goes, documents larger than 20 megabytes cannot be uploaded in the system at this time. So sometimes if you receive an error saying that you cannot upload your documentation or that there's been an error, that is the first place to check. One of the things that we have seen a lot of entities have success with, if you have a large document, if Adobe, for example, has a compress feature. So if you think that maybe it's a size issue, Adobe does have the option to allow you to compress your documents in order to reduce the size and subsequently make it acceptable for the portal. Hopefully that's it. Sometimes there are little quirks that still happen in the system where maybe you submit a document and we are not able to see it on our side. So as a heads up, that may happen where it's just, you know, something is corrupt in the system and we can't really read what you've uploaded. And unfortunately, we'll either have to have you email that in or we'll reject it back to you to try to upload again. But I think that we've worked out most of the issues in the system where that's the case. So of course, thanks for your continued support and patience while we continue doing that. It's only been a couple of years here that we've been using the system and we're still very much learning the ropes with it. So as you see things as well, quirks or things that maybe aren't quite right, it's always helpful to get an email to us so that we know. And Connie at THO is incredibly helpful at walking us through that, providing in-depth training and technical assistance to folks. She'll even do one-on-ones with you and walk you through the system if there's something particularly technical that needs to be worked through. So if you're experiencing an issue repeatedly, you know, don't spend too much time on it. Let us know, let Connie know, and we'll work with you to make sure that if it's a system issue, we get it resolved as quickly as possible. So, of course, every standard requires the proper uploaded documentation into the system in order to certify compliance. Again, without the documentation, there's really no way to know that anything happened. So oftentimes we will use meeting minutes and agendas as the most straightforward documentation that an action took place or that something was approved, et cetera, by the board. So the community needs assessment and community action plan that was submitted will be used for a lot of these standards, as well as the strategic plan. And the strategic plan will be available in the form of basically the PDF of your application in the grants portal. If you need help on how to access that, we can certainly look at that maybe after Josiah runs through his sort of example in the system, we can pull up the grants portal and show you exactly how you would pull up your portal in that as well, your application in that as well. There's a really easy way to print documents from the grants portal. But I am still going through and creating all of the applications. So hopefully that'll be done by early next week so that you can pull down those PDFs for this process. And of course, we have the resources on the DOLA website as well as the Community Action Partnership website that are extensive on content in particular. There are a lot of standards and a lot of different ways that you can sort of show that they have been met. I will say, I think some of the best ones about specific documentation that we look for in the state of Colorado are available on that website. And it's a great place to start if you're not sure what kind of documents need to be uploaded. That is where I would point you to. We have a lot of very specific resources on which documentation is acceptable for varying standards. So please do check that out. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing the presentation and have Mr. Massingale walk us through the THO system itself.
Thanks, Alex. Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be sharing a little bit about the system, THO. So friendly reminder, when you go to the website, we are working under 2023, so you want to make sure that's the year that you're selected on your drop-down. Go ahead and sign in. You'll get into the main menu area where your various functionalities and options are in here, including the annual report. We're going to actually go into the org standards, which is down here to the right. And the initial screen that you'll get on basically has a menu going from left to right at the top that goes across the 9 categories of the standard, and then some very simple menus over here on the left going down. And you can simply go into any one of the standards and start editing the standards as you see fit. When you first go into the system, you should see all your standards saying not started because they were wiped clean. From what we understand, any documentation that did not time out of the system should still be in there, but all other documentation that did time out of the system would be removed from those standards. So they should all say not started, and only documentation that had a time period on it that is still valid would be in the system still. So the vast majority of your standards are going to be pretty clean here. So let's go ahead and go into one of the categories. We'll go into category 3. This is the needs assessment category. So obviously that needs assessment that you all just worked so hard on completing and getting approved by your tripartite boards is going to be a major document that you're going to be using in this area specifically. So we can go into any of these standards and hit edit. And here's the screen that you get within the standard. You'll notice you have the standard language up top here, so you can continuously refer back to it. This standard is that your organization conducted that needs assessment and issued a report within the past 3 years. And of course, we're wanting the most recent needs assessment that you all just completed. Next, you'll notice that there's a status drop down, and it automatically goes to in process when you click on one of these standards. So it automatically changes that to in process from not started. And you'll have 2 options, in process and submitted to state. And then obviously we'll have our save button here and a cancel edits button if you want to back out anything you've done in the system. Down below, there is guidance that you can click on to see. This is really helpful and many times to see kind of what documentation is expected to be provided in the standard. Again, we're looking for the best piece of documentation that provides the evidence that the standard is met. So it's not one of those things where you want to throw a bunch of darts at the wall and see what sticks. You really want to try to identify what is the piece of documentation that would best cover this standard and or cover this standard in multiple standards. And we'll talk about that in a second. So the status up here, we'll keep an eye on. And then we have our self-assessment here, the drop down. So this is where you are to put it in, one of the statuses. Either you're still working on it. In other words, you're kind of referencing right now, you're working on it, but you're going to come back to it. You can select in process. Next is met. So this is where you've uploaded documentation in here. You perhaps have provided a note that helps us at the state and state association level understand the documentation or understand how it helps you to meet the standard or prove you're meeting that standard. And you are submitting it now saying it's been met. And then there is the unmet status. And Alex just went over the various standards that are in the system that we use. Really, this unmet from your end is when you acknowledge that you're not meeting the standard now and you're not going to meet it within that 30-month time or that 2-week time period where you could respond to our reviews. But you do have a plan in place to meet the standard in the near future. So you would simply put in the plan that you're going to work on, conduct the CNA by August 2024 might be a note, and then you're going to save it as unmet and submit it to state. And that's going to signify to us when we review it that you are acknowledging that you're not meeting the standard at this point in time, but that you have created a written technical assistance plan or a written TAP. Thus, this little note down here. I mean, this is kind of considered by us to be a written TAP, even though it's not a lot of words, and we're okay with it. So that's how the unmet function is really meant to work. Have some areas in here. We'll do the upload button here in a second, but in the next areas we have some areas where we can put some messages or comments. I really appreciate when folks when they're providing us with large documents or with technical documents that they give us a little bit of a heads up on where in that document we're really looking for the evidence of this standard. So putting little notes in this area here is very helpful for us reviewers. Again, we ask that you try to identify the best piece of documentation out there and use that, but you can use additional documents. So you can attach additional documents up in this as you see fit. And then once you do attach a document to a standard, you can then attach them to multiple standards. So those of you that have went through this process many times, you probably know, hey, this standard connects to these other 3 standards, and I'm going to upload this one document that's going to meet all 4 of those. And you can do that using this piece here. And then you'll upload the document. So let's go ahead, and we are on 3.1. The organization conducted a needs assessment and issued a report within the last 3 years. The best documentation is going to be that needs assessment. So we're going to go ahead and upload that needs assessment. Might say in here 2023 CNA, just, we know what it is. And, this needs assessment is actually going to be selected for many things. We're going to use it for 1.1 to show that low income folks were involved because we had a lot of involvement from those. And it's going to be used for 1.2, showing that we analyzed information directly from low income folks. It's going to be used for 3.1, also going to be used for 3.2 and 3.3 and 3.4. And so we go through and we select all of the different standards that this one document can be applicable and be used for. And then we're going to finally click upload document. You'll notice here that I need to be using a specific type of a document. I can't use a Word. So then we get that message there, and we have to go in and then upload a PDF into the system or some other acceptable documentation. Once you upload it and you've changed the 2 statuses to the relevant self-assessment and then submit to state, you can save edits. And then that standard should then show as being submitted to the state on our end. I'm going to stop sharing there for a second. We're going to let Alex go into that standard and kick it back to us. Actually, I guess I could keep sharing here.
Yeah, this is the super secret state side. One moment.
And so we'll just give you a look at what it looks like when a standard has been sent back. And of course, as Alex mentioned, we're going to provide you with some information on why we sent that standard back. So we try to give you a little bit of guidance on what might be a good document to submit, or if there's an obvious document that we're looking for, we'll try to outline that as well. So you'll get an email with these standards that got kicked back to you with some guidance, and then you'll be able to go into the system and you'll see whether that standard has been accepted or not accepted. So here you see if it was accepted, it would say met. This one says not met, tap required. In other words, the state office review or the state association review didn't find that the documentation was the appropriate documentation, and we didn't provide any tap items. So at this point, what we would want to do is either upload the appropriate documentation if we have it, or we're going to go ahead and acknowledge that we are not meeting this at this point in time, that it's going to be unmet, and we're going to provide a tap. And so this might be where you put in here written tap. We did not collect customer satisfaction survey data, for instance. In the CNA, we will collect it in the spring 2024 and create a CNA addendum with that information and use that updated CNA for next year. So here we are, we're acknowledging that we do not have the appropriate documentation in place. We have provided a written tap in the system here that really signifies that we're not going to be meeting it right now, and we're going to go back in. We're going to change our self-assessment to unmet and then hit save edits after we click save to state. And so now what we've done is we've told the state, yes, we acknowledge that we're not meeting it. We have a tap in place. And then if the state review then agrees with this tap in place, then the state status will be changed to unmet, meaning we have found that it's not being met, but there is a tap in place to meet it in the short term next period. So that's a little bit about the system. Alex, anything you want to jump in on to highlight, or anything I missed?
Not in particular. The statuses are a little bit complicated, so hopefully that all makes sense. A lot of it is on the, our side as reviewers to really select those very specific statuses. But yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, does anybody have questions after seeing our brief overview of the system? Okay, well, while you think, I'm going to share are you still sharing in the THO system, or were you all done with that, Jose?
I'm done.
Okay. Do we need to put anything in the progress/notes section? That's not something that we're using a lot right now, Courtney. I would say if there's things that don't fit in that sort of description with the page numbers and things, you can certainly, what we see it used most often for is just additional context, right? Like, here's the location in that one description box, but then down here, I'm also going to describe maybe what happened and kind of, some additional context, but it's not something that we have to use actively for anything in particular. Good question. Thanks for asking. Okay. So real quick, I'm just also going to go over our web page and show you some of the resources that we have that may be helpful. So one of the most helpful that we have at this time, I think, is the acceptable documentation matrix, which is a little hard to see here. But you can see we have all the standards listed over here on this side, and then things that may help you display compliance with the standard, like board bylaws or the board roster or meeting packets. So if this is a great place to start as you think about which documents to upload, especially if your documents from before have kind of timed out and you don't have a history of that. These matrices are great places to look for that. And we have public and private versions, so be sure that you're selecting the correct version for your particular entity. This is also where we'll replace this THO software training with today's training, and then we'll add the word content to this first standard training listed up here so that you know it's the content and not the system. And I think that was it for now. Oh, I also wanted to show the grants portal maybe. But I don't necessarily want to show folks his application. So just know as you go on the as I complete the review of applications and accept them, a project becomes created in the grants portal. And that's where you'll be able to see your new project, which will be CSBG-24- your entity. And then in those tabs and things is where there's a documents tab that you can use to download a PDF of your application, which does contain your strategic plan, which will pertain to several of the organizational standards. So if you do have difficulty accessing your documents in there, let us know. Not everybody is going to have those until like Tuesday or Wednesday of next week when I've completed going down the list alphabetically and working through every problem or every issue that arises with the applications. So I think that's it for now, unless anybody else has any questions. You know, best of luck. Thank you for your continued hard work and dedication to displaying and documenting all the things that you do. Hayden had a question about the THO saving information from previous submissions. Should we delete older versions, for example, the CNA? Yes, Hayden. If a document is either not the most recent or it's no longer applicable, then yes, absolutely delete them. We've kind of gone back and forth as to whether to wipe out all documents and start fresh or start with old documents that haven't timed out. And the consensus seems to have been that leaving in the documents at least allows you to, start from there if the documents are still relevant. But of course, if people are finding that it's just more tedious to delete old stuff and put new stuff, then please do let us know. But good news is, for the CNA that you're uploading this year, it'll be there for the next 2 years. And so hopefully that aspect of it will be a little bit easier for you going forward. That's a great question. Thanks for asking. And we're always trying to fine tune how useful the system is. So again, as you have feedback about your experience or things that could be better, then let us know. But for now, this is what we've heard is the best way to do it. And so we'll keep doing it that way. All right, everybody, as you have questions, let us know. Training and technical assistance is just an email or a phone call away, as always. Yeah, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks, Josiah. Thanks, Becky. And this recording will be up soon. I hope everybody has a lovely Thursday. Bye-bye.